I want to start with the hero's journey. And the idea that the hero's journey is in every piece of challenge, struggle that we go through in life. You have a regular person, put that in quotations, a regular person that's called to action. Whether life led them there or they decided to step into that adversity. In that challenge, or right before they step into that challenge, there's a little bit of contemplation. Do I want to deal with that? Am I going to be able to deal with this traffic? And am I going to be able to deal with this disease that I found myself diagnosed with? Am I going to be able to push on even though I lost a limb? Even though I lost a family member? So you have that contemplation, am I going to? Can I do it? And then you decide to push through it. And now you're put through trial and tribulation, you're put through challenge, and then you come out the other side. And then you end up all the way back at the top and you're the same person, but you've been transformed. You're that same person, but you're enhanced. And so it's tough to argue with that heroic journey is in everything that we face in life. From waking up and it's a rainy day, well, there's your call to action. You show up to work, and unfortunately you have 2 weeks left and your job's done. Call to action. A family member is diagnosed with something unfortunate. Call to action. And so if we always have these opportunities to grow as people, it begs a really, really important question that I don't think enough people are asking today. So we're told that life is getting better. We're told that life is getting better. You can order groceries from your bed on your phone. You can build a relationship with someone on your phone, in your hand, just by texting. You can wear a watch that tells you when to sleep, when to wake up, when to eat, when not to eat, when to exercise, when not to exercise, when to think, when not to think. Literally. Stop what you're doing, do some mindfulness, stop thinking. And so we think life's getting better. But when we say better, do we really mean at a deeper level that life's getting easier? Those opportunities for the heroic journey that improve us as people, there's less of them. You want to lose weight? Well, choose one of the 3,000 diets that are out there. You want to go to school? You can now do it from your laptop. You don't have to leave your house. And so is life getting better or is life getting easier? And it begs the question, if life is getting easier, are we getting weaker? So that's the question I want to start with. But today we're going to talk the macro level, the stories, the anecdotes, the theories that we can literally take today and walk out that door and start using.
I want to talk about a couple things today. My story is really focused on mental health. I want to focus on my story, kind of how I got here, but also I want to focus on what I've learned along the way, and that's really what I hope will educate you today in terms of just knowing about mental health, but also about how to manage mental health at home, relationships, at work, most importantly. And for me, when I was in high school, I was very active. I played football, rugby, all the sports, very social, lots of good friends. But I really struggled with social anxiety. And in high school, I just totally dismissed it. Probably was doing drugs and alcohol to probably cover it up a little bit. But I just kind of considered it as like a low confidence issue, low self-esteem. So I kind of pushed it to the side. Got into Laurier for business, growing my dreams, playing sports, meeting people. But that's when I started noticing these really, really intense periods of low moods, which I eventually learned was depression. And so I'd have these periods of depression, anxiety, social anxiety, depression, to the point where I didn't really think if I could keep doing this any longer because it was so intense. And so during university, like all 4 years, I didn't say a thing about it to anyone, not my family, not my friends, my roommates, nothing. I saw a therapist once, but after I saw her, once or twice, all my struggles came back. So I said, okay, therapy doesn't work. And pretty much what characterized my experience in university with mental health is I'd find a tool like therapy or meditation and mindfulness. If you have social anxiety, like really trying to talk slowly, forces you to calm down. That was like a good tool that I learned. But every time I found a tool, my mood would change to depression or suicidal situation or another type of anxiety, and it would stop working. So I'd scrap it. So I'd find a tool, really optimistic, scrap it because it didn't work, and I'd forget about it. And then find a new tool and rinse and repeat. And so when I finished university, that's kind of when things started getting interesting. I had a huge breakdown beside the road with my two friends driving home from my cottage, and I just started bawling my eyes out. And I said to them, like barely could get it out, but I said, I need your help. I need my family's help. I need everyone's help. And I've been struggling so much for so long that I just can't do this on my own anymore. And so, we did the big bro hug outside of the car, and they were there for me. We hugged and all that kind of stuff, and went to the hospital. My family came, my sister, everything, and I saw a doctor. And not too long after that, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And as Ben kind of mentioned, I spent a long time really denying my reality. And when you get diagnosed with this, you talk about stigma with mental health, and anxiety and depression are one level, but when you talk about bipolar or schizophrenia, those intense kind of diagnoses, that's when, for me, I noticed that the stigma was incredibly powerful, and I was so embarrassed about what had happened. So I spent the next year just dealing with bipolar on my own. Like, no one knew about it except my family. Did more therapy, didn't work that well. Learned more tools, they didn't sustain. All these medications made things worse. So it was kind of just an up and down year. And so after a year, we changed some medications around a little bit, and actually started feeling like pretty good for a couple days. And I was like, okay, this is not so bad, it's manageable. And then a couple more days, I was like, okay, I can do this. And I started thinking like, okay, maybe this is time for me to start opening up. And maybe this is time for me to start, helping other people who are going through this as well, because it freaking sucks. As many people in this room can probably appreciate. And so I said, okay. So this is around the time that I met Ben, and I was like, okay, I want to do something about this. So I created this initiative called Mind Cycle, and I said I was going to bike across Canada to raise awareness for mental health, totally expose myself, tell everyone I have anxiety, depression, bipolar, I've been suicidal, and I don't care if you know, I just want you to know. And I hit the road, so I quit my job, and I started biking, and I have my jersey, so people got to see on the road, and I'll highlight a story in a couple of seconds about that jersey, but it was 4 months, 10,000 kilometers, not 8. Go and just tell me. I worked hard for those 2,000. That's pretty much all Newfoundland. So yeah, 4 months, 10,000 kilometers, tons of public speaking. There is $125,000 for the Canadian Mental Health Association, just a huge success. And I grew a lot, and I'll talk about what I learned, but I want to focus on what I learned about mental health in Canada as like a big picture, bird's eye view, like what's going on. When I've been to every single province in Canada, every major city, I've met farmers in the middle of nowhere, I've talked to the old men that meet at McDonald's in Winnipeg in the morning. I've talked to everyone, and I've talked to people, mayors of towns and cities and every part of Canada. And the biggest thing that I learned about mental health is that it's one of the things that affects us the most, and it's talked about the least. Mental health is one thing, mental illness is another. We really don't like talking about mental illness, and we don't like talking about mental health. And it's just, and I want to tell one story to kind of put that in perspective. Look at that, I'm saying, here I am in the middle of nowhere. Fraser River Valley is even less remote, or even more remote than that. And here I am, middle of nowhere, middle of the mountains, BC, and someone who drives by and sees my jersey is ready to break down about their mental health, just like that. And so I started thinking, I was like, well, how many people in KW who are ready to break down like that? How many people in this massive building are ready to break down about their mental health? And how many people in this room are ready to break down about their mental health, Because I guarantee that people are. And it just kind of makes you think about how much mental health affects us, but we just don't like talking about it. So it's absolutely incredible. And so what did I learn? Like, my life has changed so much, and don't get me wrong, I have lots of bad days for sure, but my mindset about mental health has changed. It's really about not feeling like you're a victim about your mental health and your mental illness. And a big part of that is, again, talking about what Ben mentioned, is acceptance, and accepting your reality. Because all those years I was like fighting depression, fighting the negative thoughts, fighting the social anxiety, fighting everything to make it go away. And it did the opposite. And the moment I said, I'm gonna own this, I don't give a crap if people know if I'm bipolar. I'm gonna make this my, B word. And I'm gonna, because I don't own this, it's not gonna change. Like, my parents are gonna do so much. I have to fully accept this. And when I did that, that's when things started to change. That's when I did this ride, and that's why I'm here on the stage now, talking about adversity and all that kind of stuff. I've really changed my focus from, what tool, therapy, meditation, mindfulness, exercise, sleep, whatever. What tool is it gonna be that solves your issues? Away from that to how big can I make my toolbox to help me manage my issues? And so rather than thinking like meditation is gonna make everything go away, like which I did in the past, let's just add that to my toolbox so that when I'm feeling a certain way, I know that meditation is gonna help in that specific mental health situation. And when I'm feeling a different way, this tool is gonna help, and this tool is gonna help, this tool is gonna help. So the more tools that I have, the better I am at managing all different mental health situations. When I'm suicidal, I have my tools. On the ride, I got pushed to that point, and I have my tools. When I'm anxious for a presentation, I have my tools. When I'm nervous for something else, I have my tools. And it's not just mental illness, it's just how you're feeling, your thoughts, your emotions, and how you manage them. The more tools you have, the better you're at managing. And so, to leave you with something, I want to present a challenge for everyone here. And it's that if you're struggling with something, mild, medium, strong, I dare you to pick one person or another person in your life to open up to. Because it can seriously change your life, and change mine. And if someone who opens up to you that is struggling, I dare you to come back with love and compassion and support, because you can seriously change their life. People get kind of put a lot of pressure on themselves about how to manage those situations. Like, you don't have to be a doctor, you don't have to be a psychiatrist. All you have to do is just be there. Hug them. Tell them that I support you. I got your back. No matter what, I got your back. Let's work together to create a plan. And I'm going to have your back no matter what. And so, I hope everyone's kind of able to take away something from this conversation. Let's enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you.
I was arrested in 2015, and prior to getting arrested, I had a social media company downtown Toronto, but my parents also went through a breakup, and that was kind of the first family problem. I turned to alcohol and cocaine use, and the people that I was hanging out with in Toronto, in media and PR and just all those kinds of industries, there's a lot of drug use, and so it became normalized for me. So long story short, I don't know why I said yes to go on this trip, because I knew that there was going to be something going on. I didn't think I would have to be involved. He'd gained my trust enough for me to actually believe that that was true. And then when I got down to St. Lucia, where he immediately booked the tickets literally the next day. And when I got down there, I found out that I too was going to be bringing him back. And so I just got blackout the rest of that week and tried to put a Band-Aid solution onto a very deep wound. And when we came back into Canada, I was arrested. And my parents had to bail me out of jail. I'm 26 years old at this time, lived alone, had a condo in Toronto, had a dog, had pretty much everything going for me. And then this happened. So as Ben was talking about, it spiraled kind of even more out of control. When I found out I was going to prison, I actually began to see it as an opportunity. And so people were like, oh, aren't you going to be scared? They were throwing every single stereotypical fear at me. And I think other people were more scared than I was. Anyway, so in prison I kind of thought of an idea, because I saw how many people were in prison for the same thing as me, just going on these trips. Made a couple mistakes for sure, made some poor decisions, 100%, but just wanted a second chance. And I wanted to tell people kind of how it happened, because I never read about this kind of stuff in the papers. But with online dating, you end up getting to trust people rather quickly. So in prison I decided to start a popcorn company from my cell, because I had an entrepreneurial background, so I was kind of good at taking things that I had and creating something with them. And I launched it actually in prison. The warden let me out to do an event to promote it, because I want to grow it so that I can employ people that have actually done time as well, because I know how challenging it can be just from hearing other people's stories and seeing the challenges from internally and upon reintegrating into society.
What was it that allowed you to switch, instantly almost, just flip things and decide, no more alcohol? And it was in an environment where you think wouldn't actually be that great. There's assumptions with prison. It's probably from social media and Hollywood. How do you go into an environment like that, and what gave you the ability to keep pushing when you didn't have much?
Well, I think my first kind of switch was before I went in, because I had a long time. I was listed for prison for 10 months, technically prison, but I was arrested in 2015, so this thing's been going on and on and on. And I know a lot of us like to say, oh, don't look back on the past, but looking back on the past, that's what actually helped me change. right? Like when I was in prison, like my family sent me in pictures of like when I was a kid. And I began to look at all my lists of accomplishments and things like that. So I actually seeing and, you know, even albums, pictures, videos. And my mom's like, remember when you did this? Remember when you did this? I even looked at my resume from years before, like all the people that I'd worked with and all the volunteer work that I'd done. And I knew legally on a piece of paper, it said I was this bad person. But that was the only place that it said it. It didn't say that anywhere else. So that was my turning point, was like realizing that and harnessing those and getting back in touch with the people that had helped me and supported me. So it started from in here, but it took a little glance in the rearview mirror, I'm gonna have to say, yeah. So that's one of the times when actually looking back can be good. Sometimes people are like, oh, just ignore those people, but maybe it just takes like a little bit of effort sometimes, right? So, and most of the time it works. And then another thing is like sometimes there's people that have been harmed in the past and that people are in pain and they haven't found forgiveness yet. And you never know what someone else has gone through and when they went through it, and if, or like a trauma or something like that, maybe they haven't healed from a trauma, or so you just never know someone's true story until you try to find out a little bit more.
When you get up every day, you talked about knowing you have these tools in your toolbox. So that means you've assumed the negative things are going to happen. You're going to have these ups and you're going to have these downs. What has allowed you to accept that situation that, yeah, this is going to continue and it's not going anywhere?
What's it gonna do if you try to fight the fact that it's gonna keep happening? Like, that doesn't really help, right? So if you can be open to it, then you can notice the signs earlier when you're struggling and start using your tools earlier and probably bounce back faster. So it's an advantage to be aware and accepting that it's probably gonna keep happening. We all have physical health. We all have mental health. Some of us has physical illness. Some of us have mental illness. And even if you have an illness or not, it's still extremely beneficial to think about your mental health. How do you feel? Like, what kind of negative thoughts do you have on a consistent basis? Can you identify them? Identify some trends? Do you feel bad most of the time when you're hungover? I do. And I haven't drank in 4 months and it's been the best 4 months of my life. Or when you get a bad sleep, you tend to have really negative thoughts the next morning. All those kind of things. Identify the trends, and that's just mental health, right? It's not saying you have bipolar. And if you can start identifying those patterns and start finding some different strategies to help you manage those situations, you're gonna live so much healthier. You're gonna have better relationships with your partners and your kids, I assume, and in work, at the workplace. And so it's extremely beneficial to just like acknowledge and be aware of your mental health and stop, doing the things that kind of block it out and denying the reality of what's going on.
But when you work on accepting things, you feel so powerful, and now that issue that was in the back of your mind forever that you've been pushing back there, you've dealt with it. Now you can take on more challenge. And so that idea of acceptance that Brian just talked about, for one, it's given him the ability to live. Before he was struggling, he just biked 10,000 kilometers across Canada. Like it's accepting things, but we've been given so many tools to not do that. So I think you can catch yourself though, and I'm still working on it. We all can. But catch yourself and work on accepting things.
But people thought, wow, he has all these girls, people love him, he goes to all these parties, everything else, he's in the OHL, like what a sweet life. What they didn't know is I'd go home at night and I'd cry. Drop my friends off, drop my girlfriend off, whatever, I'd go home and cry every night. I hated myself. I wanted to die. And on more than one occasion when I was playing major junior hockey and into professional hockey, I tried to kill myself. And it was predominantly due to the language I heard in locker rooms, language I heard at school, language I heard at parties. That's gay, you're a fag, terms like that were so commonly used that I felt like I couldn't be me and be a hockey player. So I began to numb. I numbed with alcohol. I drank almost every day from the age of 18 or 17 to 23. Hid it from my family, hid it from my friends, hid it from my billets and team, and it had a major impact on my hockey career. I went from being on the NHL draft list and supposed to make the NHL, same story, Ben was saying, people are telling you you're gonna play in the NHL, you're gonna have this phenomenal career, to, constantly injured, very depressed, suicidal. And I think the injuries and the depression sort of went hand in hand. I set myself down. because I knew two things were about to happen. One, my career was ending. You don't go from these, top heights to down here and things, get better without some sort of shift. And number two, I recognized that if I didn't change my habits and a term that's used today and that I use a lot is accept myself, I would likely end up dead. So when that season ended, I came back and moved to Toronto, and I went on a date with a guy. We actually ended up dating for 3 years. Any of you been in a 3-year relationship? A few of you, maybe? No? Nobody? Well. 3 years is a long time. 3 years is a very long time in your early 20s. 3 years is an exceptionally long time when nobody in your life knows about the person. I wouldn't share in hockey because I feared it would jeopardize my career, and even after I retired, I began working with players, and I feared that if they knew or the parents knew that I was gay, they wouldn't want their children working with me. So I didn't tell them. And then one day I received a phone call that kind of changed things from a hockey mom. But this call was a little different. It wasn't about little Johnny's ice time. It was, this mom calls me and says, "Brock, I want to set you up on a date." And I thought, oh dear God, no. What am I going to say? How am I going to handle this? Then I started thinking, I'm kind of curious, what does she think my type is? So I said, all right, what's her name? And she says, Steve. I say, what? She's like, "Brock, you're gay." I'm like, what? And she's like, "You're gay." I'm like, what are you talking about? Now she's really short-tempered and agitated that I won't just fess up. She's like, "You're gay, Brock, you're gay." And she's screaming at me. And I'm like, "How do you know that?" And she's like, "Oh, my son told me. He's known for years." And her son was 15 at the time. I said, "How does he know that?" And I'm shocked. And she's like, "Oh, yeah, all the boys know." So I start panicking, I'm hyperventilating basically on the phone, I break into sweats and heart's racing. I'm like, this is my job, these kids, these cocky hockey boys, they're not gonna wanna work with me anymore, the parents are gonna find out I'm gay, they're all gonna leave, how am I gonna pay and finish in school, rent, everything else? And I thought, wait, all these cocky hockey boys who think they are, a gift to the world, whose heads can't fit through doors. No, I'm gay. In Northern Ontario, and choose to work with me. How cool is that? I really believe that today people are far more inclusive in thoughts than in the past, especially younger generations. But their language hasn't evolved as quickly as their thoughts. I recognize I could do a little sociology experiment. Because they know I'm gay. But they don't know that I know that they know that I'm gay. So I decided to observe their behaviors. And I started recognizing, I always tried to curb sexist, racist, and homophobic language with my athletes, but I started to notice that anytime they'd say something homophobic, they'd sort of freeze up and apologize, put their head down, sorry. I'd just be like, it's cool. I thought, well, maybe we're creating a little shift here. Maybe I'm creating a shift in a hyper-masculine, macho-dominated culture. I should probably come out, but I was afraid. I was afraid due to growing up in the game and the language I heard and everything else, but then a few things happened that sort of shifted it. There was an incident at Pulse nightclub in Orlando where somebody walked into a gay bar and murdered 49 people just for being gay. And for my community, those spaces, those gay bars are safe spaces where people can go and be themselves without fear of judgment, without fear of violence, without fear of any threats or abuse. They can love who they love for who they are. And then one of my friends was running Toronto Pride, and he actually ended up on an ISIS hit list just for being gay. And that's when I knew I had to step up and do something, and I wrote an article for Yahoo Sports coming out publicly. And then I started traveling around North America. I speak at, events, I go to schools, I go to sports teams, I've spoken across the OHL and to minor hockey, minor sports teams, and my goal is to create a shift in the culture. And then, who here thinks they're normal? Please, answer honestly. Who here wants to be normal? Everybody? Everybody wants to be normal? I'm going to leave you with this one thing, and I think once we recognize this, it'll break so many barriers in society, whether it's dealing with race, gender, sexuality, mental health, anything. Normal doesn't exist. It's a fallacy. All of you, look around. You're all different. You all have different hair color, eye color, skin color, body shapes, body sizes, different thoughts, dreams, passions, goals, reasons you're here right now. Thoughts going through your moment at this exact second. You're all different. All of you, you're a bunch of weirdos. And that's a beautiful thing. Thank you.
All right, so, don't worry, you don't have to cut yours short because Brock went a little over, but that's.
My name's Kelly, and I had an eating disorder for 17 years. And I thank you for no one visibly rolling their eyes at that, because there is a lot of stigma, as Ben was saying, about eating disorders and what they are. Like, you know, you look at it and you're like, well, that's just someone who is really vain and wants to be thin and is willing to absolutely damage everything about their health in pursuit of that goal. And quite frankly, if you asked me when I was 17 and I was first diagnosed why I was starving myself, my answer was because I want to be thin. Because I'm an actor and we have to be thin and that's what we do and that's it. There is nothing else going on here. You can leave me alone, that is it. And that was not true. That was my absolute defense mechanism because when it comes to eating disorders, we like to say that genetics loads the gun and life pulls the trigger. So genetically, I am predisposed to have an eating disorder. There's a little switch in the brain where if a normal person, if a neurotypical person is stressed out and hungry, then eating food will remove the stressor of being hungry. It makes sense for us to calm down when we've eaten. It's a stressor that, you know, sends us out to search, find food, eat, survive. When you have someone with anorexia, that switches backwards. So eating food actually increases the stress hormones in my body indeed. So if I'm in a place where I'm in a negative calorie balance, where I'm ingesting fewer calories than I'm putting out, then that switch becomes really, really active. And the act of eating any food is really, really stressful for me. And for me, that stress paired with my life stress was the trigger that made me starve for so many years. So I went through a lot of trauma in my early years and right up through my adult life, as we all do. I've had PTSD since I was about 2 years old, and I was self-harming before I was in kindergarten. So for me, over the years, instead of turning to something like alcohol or drugs, because of the way I'm wired, it made sense for me to try and numb out these emotions, these traumatic responses by just starving it. You know, it's who I was that starving made me stress less. And so that went on for a lot of years. And I, you know, had a career as an actor and was starving and performing and figuring it all out anyhow. But I was doing my last tour as an actor, doing a very happy, peppy musical. And on the tour bus between shows, I got a call from a friend that another friend of ours in the eating disorder world had checked herself out of the inpatient treatment program she was in, and she'd been stockpiling her medication, and she died by suicide that day. And I sat there and realized that if I didn't change my life, that was where I was going, because I'd already attempted many times. It's, you know, it's part of the journey. You really hate yourself if you're starving a lot. And so that was the moment when I said, okay, I'm either going to do this, I'm either going to do recovery, or, you know, or I'm going to die. Those are my options. I can't keep living in this in-between. So digging in and doing the work on the deeper traumas and the core issues that made me want to, well, made it so that starving was my best option. That was when I was finally able to recover. And it's an interesting journey because, you know, you deal with the body image piece and you deal with the deeper traumas, but when you look at body image at its core, it's really not about the body, because if any one of us lived on a desert island all by ourselves, no chance of any other human ever seeing us again, we probably wouldn't really care how much we weighed or what we looked like or what our hair was doing. We'd just get up and survive. It's the introduction of other people that makes us have issues with those things. And that's because body image to us has become synonymous with acceptance, with love, with just fitting in the world. Our world is very fat phobic and it is not designed for people in larger bodies. And it becomes the easiest thing in the world to read those calories on the menu, to look at the calories on our Apple Watches and our Fitbits, and just make our lives this numeric calculation instead of actually looking inside. And I think that's where the change comes in when it comes to things like that, is being able to look deeper. And that is also where the fear comes in. That is the most terrifying thing to do, because none of us wants to look deeper. You know, we have to actually look at what's going on in our brains. That's where we run into all of the pain. And if we want to actually move forward in life, those are exactly the places we need to move into. So it's a matter of being afraid and moving into that fear and doing everything I had to do and still being scared and being okay with being scared. It didn't mean I wasn't brave. It didn't mean I wasn't doing hard things. It meant that I was doing hard things while terrified. And that was a big changing moment for me. There's a book I read by Anna Forrest, and the book's called Fierce Medicine. And she talks about treating your fear like an animal, and instead of running from that animal, you turn around and you stalk it. You move towards it, you find out what makes it tick, you find out what its triggers are, and you use that information to form a relationship with your fear instead of perpetually running from it. Because as long as you're running from it, that's something that is going to continue to be a fear in your life. But if you can turn around and face it head on, then you have a chance of beating it or forming a new relationship with it that just isn't quite as scary. When you're going from a place of you are a horrible person who doesn't deserve to live, going to, no, I'm the best person on the planet and I'm great and I should love myself, that's not a reasonable leap. That doesn't compute. That's when my brain just shuts down. It's like, nope, flip the table, I'm done. I can't do this because there's no way I can get from there to there. But if I can introduce a little bit of maybe in there, okay, so maybe I'm a terrible person, maybe I don't deserve to live, but today I'm going to eat breakfast and just see if that's true. And I'm going to try doing something different and just open up the door that maybe I'm not the world's worst person, maybe I'm just the second worst. And let's go with that. Great. And so opening up to those baby steps of changing my mentality is what allowed me to get to a positive mind space. Because I find a lot of times trying to create a positive mind space where you're in such a dark place is just another way to cover up the issues. It's going, no, everything's great. I am thinking very positively about this person who just tore out my heart and ate it. And yeah, I'm fine. Clearly I'm fine. Everything's great. I'm really positive right now and I'm very happy about this, and you just completely ignore the issues. And so that kind of like toxic positivity becomes a problem, and it's, you know, getting to the issues and figuring out how you can learn from them, how you can grow from them, and just taking a step of what's possible, moving one step forward. You can't do a giant leap, it's not possible. Just take that one step forward and trust that there's another one that's gonna follow. And if there's not, you're gonna learn how to adapt there.
It's such a powerful point, and all the guests I've had on the podcast, and then even reflecting on the psychology and philosophy side of optimism, there's something called blind optimism. And I've looked into the definition of that and the meaning, and it's that you go into something similar to what you said, positive and optimistic, what's going to happen, something good is going to come of this, But blind optimism also means that you're at the point where you're not even aware of the detriments that could happen, because you're so far off in this positive mindset. And there's a lot of discussion about blind optimism in the hero's journey, and it's one thing that I agree with it, but there's an issue. In the hero's journey and what we're talking about, it's not that you don't know the detriments of what's going to happen. It's that you're okay with what could happen. And I'll ask you a question that may challenge your ego a little bit, is that often we're scared to set goals for ourselves. We need blind optimism, but also knowing what could happen, the detriments, and being okay with the negative things that could happen. We're afraid to set goals for ourselves because as soon as we do that, I want to run a 5-minute mile. Now we put a number on it, and now what does that create? An opportunity to fail. I'm not going to go for the 5 minutes today. I'm just going to try and go for 6, because then I'll know I'll get under 6 and I'll feel like a hero. So what blind optimism does, it actually makes us aware of what could happen. It gives us the ability to push through anyways, for the chance to be the hero of our own story. Because we did get under 5, we tried for it. Maybe we missed it the first 6 times. But there's so many people that don't set that goal, that never get the chance to achieve that because of the fear, which Kelly just talked about. So in conclusion to where this whole thing started, I talked about the hero's journey. I talked about venturing through challenge, and that where we're at in life is telling us not to go through that challenge, not to go through that heroic journey, that we don't get to come all the way around to the top and be an enhanced person, a transformed person, a better person. And so really what this entire thing about taking control of the journey you're on, the path you're on, really comes down to finding yourself in one of those storms. Whether you're confused, you've lost someone, whatever that adversity is, you find yourself in that, and we all do. On a macro and a micro level, we find ourselves in that adversity, and in that adversity, we sit there for a second. And we remind ourselves of 2 things. One is that these traits that we've all talked about, these ideas, Brian Martin wasn't born with a handbook on, hey, here's what you're going to do when you're diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Brock McGillis didn't have a to-do list on, hey, when you're in the hockey world and you realize you're gay, here's what you're going to do. Same for Emily, same for Kelly. They didn't have to-do lists, they didn't have checklists, they didn't have instructions. They sat in that challenge. They contemplated it, they went through that trial and tribulation, and now look at how incredible they are. Look what they've become. To remind yourself that those characteristics are in you, it's innate. As humans, you want to talk biology, we're here because we've adapted. And there's really, scientifically, I don't know how you would argue that, we've adapted, we have these characteristics in us. But we have to pull them out of ourselves, and I'm telling you, look at the proof is in the pudding, that those traits come out of you when you sit in that storm, in that challenge. And the other thing you remind yourself is that when you're the hero of your own story, when you decide to be the hero of your own story, you become a hero for other people. And so, for me personally, that's not only a reason to live every single day to the fullest, that's a reason to live every rainy day to the fullest. Thank you.